Thank you very much. So last up is our speaker, Allison Parish. She's a computer programmer, a poet, educator and game designer whose teaching and practices addresses the unusual phenomena that blossom when language and computers meet, with a focus on artificial intelligence and computational creativity. She's a teacher at NYU Interactive Telecommunications program, where she earned her master's degree in 2008. She was also named Best Maker of Poetry Bots by the Village Voice in 2016, and she's been published, her computer-generated poetry has been published in Ninth Letter and Vetch. And you're going to talk to us today about computer-generated poetry.
Something like that.
Something. Here, you can just say this.
No, I got it. Okay, so hi everyone. I have my notes on my phone, and I realized only when I was sitting up here that I don't have enough hands to operate all of these things at once. So let me see if I can. That's almost good, right? Maybe if I turn that upside down.
Yeah, if you want me to just click, you can signal me to click.
No, I can do it.
All right.
Okay, I can successfully move forward in my slides and backwards. Look at that. I'm like a cyborg. Hello everyone. I'm Allison Parish. I'm a poet, a programmer, and game designer. I am a professor at the Interactive Telecommunications program at New York University, where I teach a class called Reading and Writing Electronic Text, which is a class about computer-generated poetry and learning how to program in Python. My most recent project that sort of illustrates the kind of work that I do is this book of poetry that was just released by Counterpath just last month. It's called Articulations, and I've included a sample of the output here. This book started out as an exploration of the idea of similarity in poetry. And actually hearing Ben discuss this project, I realized that there's actually a lot of similarities between this project and his. So started out with the idea of similarity in poetry and how similarity, whether phonetic, syntactic, or semantic, contributes to our sense of poeticness and cohesion in a text. The poetry is constructed from a corpus of several million lines of poetry that I extracted from Project Gutenberg, which is a database of thousands of texts that are in the public domain. And then I used a phonetic dictionary called the CMU Pronouncing Dictionary to create a computational model of phonetic similarity that predicted a vector, or like a sequence of numbers, like a point in space, for each line of poetry. Then those vectors had the property where two lines that sounded similar to each other are closer. The vectors are more similar if the lines of poetry sound similar to each other. So the composition itself is accomplished by doing a random walk through that space. Essentially, it starts with a randomly selected line of poetry and then finds the line of poetry that is most phonetically similar to that, and then adds that to the output, and then finds the line of poetry that's most similar to that and adds it to the output, and so forth until it's produced like, a book of poetry, and it excludes any line that's previously been in there. The end result is a kind of poetry where cohesion is achieved only through phonetic similarity. That's the only organizing principle of this text, is that the lines sound similar to each other. It's weird and it's a lot of fun to read. So I thought I might, since I am a poet, I should read some poetry. The other artists here today have the benefit of being able to show videos of their work that sort of express what they're about. But I feel like just seeing this on the screen, you don't really understand what it's like. So I'm gonna read it. Sweet hour of prayer, it was the hour of prayers. In the hour of parting, hour of meeting, hour of parting, this with power avenging. His towering wings, his power enhancing in his power, thus the blithe powers about the flowers, chirp about the flowers, a power of butterfly must be with a purple flower, might be the purple flowers it bore. The petals of her purple flowers where the purple aster flowered, here's the purple aster of the purple aster, there's lives a purpose stern. A sterner purpose fills turns up so pert and funny of motor trucks and vans, and after kissed a stone, an ode after Easter. and iron laughter stirred. O wanderer, turn, O wanderer, return, O wanderer, stay, O wanderer, near, been a wanderer. I wander away, and then I wander away, and thence we wander away, and then we would wander away, away, oh why, and for what are we waiting, oh why, and for what are we waiting, why then, and for what are we waiting? A little excerpt of how that feels, thank you. Articulations is a part of a series of computer-generated books released by Counterpath. Whoops, let me come back. This is a mess. Released by Counterpath, and the series is called Using Electricity, and it's named after a line in Alison Noll's House of Dust, which is a early important work of computer poetry. The series is edited by Nick Montfort, who also showed up in Sophian's slides. And Nick's book was also released as a book in this series. That's Nick's books there. It's called The True List. These books just came out, and we did a little tour of the Northeast United States together, along with Rafael Parish YT, whose book was also released in the series recently. Nick's book is also a book of computer-generated poetry. In this case, it uses a small data set and a deterministic algorithm to generate a sequence of English compound words like Waterfield, Moonhill, Ringsack, Windman. I urge you to seek out this book and recordings of Nick reading it, because it's really remarkable and entertaining, and it makes your brain do interesting things. On tour, when he's introducing this book, he would talk about the word true, because the book is called The True List. And he points out that this word means not necessarily factual, but the opposite, or not necessarily the factual in the sense of the opposite of false, but in the sense of conforming to a pattern, or in the sense of the verb to true, which means to straighten or to align or to make even with something, like when you true a painting that's hanging on the wall, or you true the spokes of a bicycle wheel. This is going to get weird. I might have to. It's feeling good so far. This weird thing that I'm doing. Maybe I'll try it this way now. No, that's not going to work here. Thank you. No, we're good. We're on the right side now. Okay. So simultaneously, I've been rereading the book Ted Berrigan's book, The Sonnets, which is this really amazing book of poems composed with a cut-up process, similar to the one used by Burroughs and Brian Geisen. This is maybe my favorite book of poetry of all time. I should have included an excerpt of it here. But that book is from 1964. Berrigan was sort of working in the same era as Cage and the Fluxus and all of the stuff happening in that scene. And this is a quote from the introduction to the book. Alice Notley wrote this introduction, and I'm just going to read this. For Cage, the application of a method results in a work or a performance that's serene and free, or rather liberated, as Cage is a serious Zen Buddhist and his work is permeated with Buddhist thought. For Ted, it more results in one that's deeply true. An aleatory method used with seriousness and respect puts one in touch with hidden powers and truths within oneself and becomes revelatory, hopefully in a way that might be relevant to anyone. Yet by giving oneself up to chance, an artist does not lose his or her originality. As Marcel Duchamp said, your chance is not the same as mine, just as your throw of the dice will rarely be the same as mine. And that was really interesting to me. Next slide, please. So I take it as axiomatic that cut-up procedures are a kind of computational procedure. Even if Ted Berrigan wasn't working with a computer, it's still essentially a computational process to take a text and cut it up and randomly arrange its components, or other techniques for rearranging a text. But that formulation that it was enabling Ted Berrigan to do something that was more true, that really struck me. And it sort of helped me put this question to my research: can computers help us write poetry that is true? And true, again, in that sense, not of like being the opposite of false, being factual, but instead poetry that is firm and that's fundamental, that expresses something that is true, right? Next slide, please. Of course, most people don't think of computer-generated poetry in these terms, right? Usually the idea of computer-generated poetry is framed like this, where that narrative of the labor of artificial intelligence, where any AI task is essentially just trying to take over the labor of a person, and the idea that, human expression will be superseded by cold robotic precision eventually, and we just have to go along with it. We're helpless to resist, right? And that relies on this idea that you can formulate the composition of poetry as a task that boils down to just like a list of instructions, which you can, with research, be reproduced with perfect fidelity. And if you look at a lot of the academic research that's happening in artificial intelligence and computational creativity right now, it's all based around this idea of how can we specifically create poetry that tricks people into thinking that it was written by human beings in a typical way, like even reifying the difference between human and machine authorship, which I don't actually think exists, and hopefully you'll see that by the time I'm finished speaking. But that idea that the purpose of using artificial intelligence in art is to recreate with as much fidelity as possible things that are produced by humans without aid of those techniques, I think is like extremely boring. Like it's the worst possible thing to do with this technology. Next slide, please. When I'm making poetry with a computer, I'm actually thinking about this line of argumentation that was, it's been articulated by many people in many different ways. But Victor Shklovsky in 1916 in that wonderful old saw, which I can get to somehow in my notes, Art is Device. He says the purpose of art is to impart sensation to an object as something seen rather than merely recognized. The device of art is the device of estrangement of things and the device of defacilitated form, enhancing the difficulty and duration of perception. So the perceptual process in art is an end in itself and should be prolonged. Give me the next one there, Ben. Thank you. And then talking specifically about poetry, he says, in studying poetic speech in its phonetic and lexical structure, as well as in the characteristic thought structures compounded from the words, we find material obviously created to remove the automatism of perception. Right? So in other words, the goal of poetry is to make language unfamiliar by making language unexpected. Next slide, please. So Tristan Tzara, who was a Dadaist, writing about the same time as Shklovsky actually, had sort of the prototypical idea of how to make language unfamiliar. This, I think, is one of the earliest examples of a computer-generated poem, even though, again, it's not generated by a computer. It's just a procedure that is sort of computational in nature. And in this technique, the poem is composed not by arranging words, by intention in the way that we usually associate with poetry, especially like the romantic poets like Wordsworth or whatever. Instead, the poem is composed from a source material that's taken from the surrounding environment, like a newspaper in this case, and then arranged according to a procedure, and that procedure is to select a word at random and add it to the end of the poem, and then remove that from the pool of potential words. And with this procedure, you're very likely to end up with an arrangement of words that's never before been seen in recorded history, right? And it's nonsense, but it's nonsense that is a result of a process that can be understood, right? Now there's one line from this that I think is important. We can go over what exactly he says in here. Take a newspaper, take a pair of scissors, choose an article as long as the poem that you want to make, cut out the article, cut out each of the words, blah, 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 copy conscientiously. The last point there, I think, is this very typical masculine, sarcastic distancing from the amazing thing that you just did. Oh, I invented this process and it's really cool, but now I have to stand back from it and say that I'm actually better than it. But it's that line right before that that I think is most interesting. Can you give me the next slide there, please, Ben? Oops. The poem will resemble you, right? And note that Tzara didn't say the poem will resemble the reader, right? He's not just talking about apophenia here. He's not just talking about the idea of picking out patterns and randomness. he's talking to you, the writer. Like, it was how to write a .s poem. He's talking to the person who's following that tutorial, right? The poem made with this procedure will resemble you, the writer. And I keep thinking about this line, and for me, it succinctly and presciently addresses algorithmic bias, like the idea that if you take the world and cut it up and decide how that cut up process will proceed and how the world will fit back together, it's about you. And I talked to Nick Montfort about this, and he, I don't know, we can all talk about this here. I don't know if these two would also think that their work resembles them, that it's saying something about them as individuals, but I think it's very clear that it is. Like, all of these decisions that all of us are making with these techniques are about our own aesthetics at some point, and about our own lives. Next slide there. Oh, you're already there. Oh, wow. We're having some machine learning happening up here, right? Distributed cognition, yeah. This is Jackson Maclow, a quote from Jackson Maclow, who is also a contemporary of Cage, and who also worked with techniques using randomness and chance and procedure. And I think this quote sort of sums up how, like, the mental progression, even for me, in making the kind of work that I make, and how it moves from this idea of, like, well, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to, like, expose, like, the underlying structure of something that I'm trying to remove the ego of the artist from the process, right? But Jackson Maclow says the motive for the use of chance, means, etc., was to be able to generate a series of dharmas relatively uncontaminated by the composer's ego. It was such a relief to stop making artworks that carry the burden of expression. But, he says, I do allow my own emotions to influence my systematically generated work. My choices of means, materials, etc. can't help being influenced by emotions, and I'd be foolish if I thought they weren't, right? And from this, what I'm realizing and what I take away and what I've been concentrating on almost in my own work is that computer-generated poetry isn't about automating the work of the poet, but instead amplifying that work and letting it accomplish things that would otherwise be difficult or impossible to accomplish.
Too fast?
No, that was good. I was talking about the idea of nonsense before, and nonsense is, like, usually something that has, like, a negative connotation. Like, we don't like nonsense. It's something that we would prefer to avoid. But nonsense at some point is, like, sort of the point of poetry. It's like we're trying to make language that's unexpected, language that has never been heard before. People resist it, but poetry is about making language unfamiliar, and language that's unfamiliar is difficult and frightening. And sort of the role of the poet, in my view, is to make nonsense that follows systems that people can be led into by the hand, so that they can undergo these processes that use their sense of how to understand language in ways that open up their minds to different ways for reality to work. I think this is this is the last slide. So I'm just eyeing you out of, okay, all right. I can't tell if she's being impatient with me or not. No. So I haven't, like, focused a lot on, like, the specifics of any machine learning stuff in this talk. That's because for me, I don't really see artificial intelligence and machine learning as being categorically different from the perspective of the artist from techniques that just have to do with chance or procedure. Like, to me, it seems to stem directly from that, and a lot of the same artistic moves and, rhetorical moves that you can make with those other previously used and still frequently used types of work, types of algorithmic work, are very similar to the ones that can be done with machine learning specifically. But the things that you can do with a computer that Tristan Tzara couldn't do with a pair of scissors and a newspaper have to do with data and scale. Like, I can make work that, whereas if Tristan Tzara wanted to make a cut-up of, like, a newspaper, that was fine. If you wanted to make a cut-up of every newspaper, he wouldn't be able to do that because of the labor involved, right? But I, as a poet, can make a cut-up of, like, every newspaper. I can find a corpus of, like, every newspaper ever published or something close to that, and then use that cut-up technique on that, and then see how that's different, like what's added to it by that. The other difference is scale, which goes along with that. Like I can do things very quickly with a lot of data. And those are the things I think that really open up the possibilities for artists working with these potentials. And machine learning is really just a way of like sort of managing that scale. Yeah, so when I'm talking about my own work, I see it, directly as an extension of the kind of work that Jackson Maclow and Tristan Zara and Ted Berrigan were doing with chance procedures, coming up with new ways to compose language using procedure and chance. And then I have my social media info on that slide. So that's it.
Thanks.